Hey everyone, I'm audible now. Hi everyone, it's Marc Sabatella from the Mastering MuseScore School here, and welcome to the Music Masterclass. So this is the weekly series I do on Thursdays where I talk about music, take a look at some of your music, and talk about what makes things work and what we can work on. So I hope you're all ready. We got some stuff to talk about today. So thanks everyone for being here and checking in and letting me know where everyone's from. I would love to see that. As I've mentioned, I'm normally in Colorado, but I'm in Florida today. Um, yeah, what I am going to be talking about is I've talked about Counterpoint periodically on and off for the last several months. And because of some of the music submitted today, it's another day to talk specifically about some counterpoint issues, but not specifically in the context of fugues or anything, which I had been talking about a lot, but more generally what some of the issues that kind of come up are. And so I'm just going to jump in with some of the music that has been submitted, and then kind of go from there. So I want to get up the right piece here because I feel like, one of these two is already open. I want the D. There we go, the B minor one. There we go. So this is from Dennis McShane. So, and I see that you're here, which is great. And so he's got some really nice comments in here that are going to help. I accidentally opened the mixer before, and that had the side effect of making my palette too wide. So I got to do my thing of getting my palette the way I like it. There we go. All right. So he's got these really nice kind of notes about the program, about the piece of music, which is fantastic because he's talking about some of the things he's doing and gives me some talking points here. So I love it when people can do things like this because then I can address some kind of specific things. And he's not so much asking questions here, but it gives me some good starting point for things. So I'm going to start just by playing you through the music of this piece, and then I'm going to quickly take a look at the other one that he submitted as well. So this is the B minor invention, or contravention, as he's calling it. There you go. So this is this piece that's in a form that's called an invention. At least that's what Bach called these things. And so this is Dennis McShane's version of this type of form. And before I talk about the specifics of this, I want to play a few measures of the other one that he also submitted here. I'm going to switch the order of these because just to get you a sense of the similarities, and then we can talk about where this is coming from. I'll play you the Bach piece that this is one of the Bach pieces that this is kind of related to. So here we go. So I just want to play a little bit of that one because I'm going to focus more on the B minor one for now. I'll probably go back and forth between them, but I want to keep this one in our minds. So one of the things to talk about is, well, first of all, what does he mean when he talks about an invention? And so I want to play one of the Bach inventions that is sort of the model for this type of composition. So that, excuse me, that is Bach's invention number one in C major. So those of you who already know, what is meant by invention, hopefully now you're seeing what's going on in these pieces. But if not, those of you who aren't as familiar with the concept of invention, by showing you the three examples and how they all kind of illustrate it, maybe that will give you a starting point for things. And by the way, I used the word model, and I said this was the model for Dennis's pieces. Not necessarily in the specific sense when I talk about model composition, which we've been kind of talking about a little bit the last week or two. That's really meaning like I'm going to look at a specific piece and try to base my piece on how that piece does things. And here, this is really just one example. We could look at, I think he wrote a book of like 15 different inventions, and they're all very similar in these things, but no one specific one is necessarily forming the model, but it's just the collective Bach's inventions in general. And what's going on is you have a melody. That is the theme. That is the theme for the entire piece. The piece is 22 measures long, and at some level, every single measure is based on that one theme. This is typical of a lot of Baroque music. Whatever theme gets set up at the very beginning, the rest of the piece is kind of elaborating that theme. Maybe not just that exclusively, but that's kind of the main thing going on. So here, the next thing that happens is the left hand comes in with the exact same melody, right? Meanwhile, the right hand does what's called a counter theme. Boom, ba, da, dum, dum. I guess that's the whole thing. Boom, ba, da, dum, dum. And that's a counter theme. It's the counterpoint to the main theme. And those two themes in juxtaposition, like the very next thing we hear is that same theme again, but this time in G instead of C, right? And then the left hand gets to also go, gets to do more or less the same thing. You might notice the first, there's always, well, not always, but there's often little adjustments. When the right hand came in with it ended on a D, and when the left hand comes in, it ended on a C instead of a D. Those little adjustments of the first note or the last note, these happen all the time in this kind of music. So, but while the left hand is doing that, the right hand is again going boom, bum, ba-dum. So it's using that same counter theme. Well, throughout the piece is going to just be more variations on that. And not just, some of them are really obvious, like here. Ooh, sorry, sorry, wrong note. That's that same theme transposed now to G, and using the version of it where it ends on the note I didn't sing. G. Sorry, I'm wrong key. D, E, F sharp, G, da, 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 G. Coming back to the same note that was the top note. Whereas the original version ended one note higher than there, right? So there's like two different versions of this theme depending on that last note. But we get to see that same theme again. And we also see things like this. That's the same theme inverted, right? The original theme started with 4 ascending notes, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then had this little stair step pattern, right, where it went down a third, up a step, down a third. So it's big step down, little step up, big step down, little step up. So this version is the inversion, where it starts with 4 notes going down. A, this B is like part of the previous phrase. So think of it as starting with this A, right, on the second 16th of the group, just like the original theme started with C on the second 16th. So here we have 4 notes going down. Then instead of big step down, right, we had that third down, step up, third down. This is third up, step down, third up, step down. So it's exactly upside down. That's, in a nutshell, now we've just described what you're going to see throughout most of these inventions. You see the theme transposed into a couple different keys. Here we saw it in C, I guess, but it's in C, but that kind of leading, the note we led to was F. And then we get it here. This is really in C, but it's transposed to start on G. This one started on C. This one started on G. They're both in the key of C, right? There's not an accidental to be seen in those first 3 measures. But this version really is in G. It's got F sharps in it. So this idea that the theme goes into different keys throughout, and there'll be other places in the piece where we'll see other versions of the theme I'm looking for where I know it was a minor key version, but I only see the inverted versions, but that's fine. That version, that's a minor key version. Now that was the descending, right? The upside down version, but going to D minor. So we see that theme. We see it in different keys. We see it inverted sometimes. And we also see things like this, which is kind of what's called a sequence. Right, that's the same 2 measures or 2 beats over and over again. We have and then we get, so that's a pattern. Then we get essentially the same pattern. So it's this sequence of descending measures, of descending lines. It's right. It's that exact pattern from the original theme upside down. So we get that 4 notes and then that stair-steppy thing, then 4 notes, stair-steppy thing, 4 notes down, stair-steppy thing, 4 notes down, stair-steppy thing, right? It's like, it's called a sequence because it happens over and over again. But here, A was the top note. Where I'm singing the top note of this. And it sometimes goes down. The pattern is a little bit different because he does the same sort of thing of occasionally adjusting how the pattern works. But actually, I should have sung maybe I'm just looking at the fact that it started off, I was thinking it was only going down a step, and after that, it felt like it was going down a third, but that's because I was comparing this note here on the second 16th. It was as if there was a B at the beginning, right? Then it would have been B going down to G, then going down to E, then going down to C. So the sequence is kind of working its way downward. And that's just a really typical thing. There's another kind of sequence thing that happens over here. Right? So I'm noticing by singing the long notes of the pattern, you can see how it's descending. But if I just sang the high note of each pattern, well, whatever, it's the high notes are also descending. If you follow this pattern, the descending pattern, this starts with A coming down. This one starts with G coming down, and then it goes back and forth between the hands. That's what happens in this style of music. So then again, returning to Dennis's piece, let's listen to some of that again. We'll see exactly that happening. That's our theme. And then the theme gets taken up by the viola. Now, he says he originally wrote this for piano and then just decided to split it up for violin and viola. And I've done exactly the same sort of thing. I've written as, composition exercises, pieces just like that, and wrote them at the piano to be played on piano, and then at some point decided, I have a gig coming up with a string quartet, it would be fun to have them play some of those pieces. So I actually took some of my piano counterpoint pieces and arranged them for the string quartet. And yeah, in some cases I changed the key, because he says he originally, well, the other one anyhow, he wrote in C originally, then transposed to D. So anyhow, we have that. And then in the viola, so the exact same melody. And then we have this kind of counter theme. And then we have the same counter theme that then gets stated in the viola, more or less. So, and then we get to keep here comes that theme again. Except here it's adjusted by one note to fit what's going on. And then the violin. Right? And this is a sequence that's happening here. Let's listen to this. And then the sequence ends. But you can see by paying attention to the quarter notes, the quarter notes are D, B, and then it's C sharp, A, and then it's B, G, right? So it's that sequence of quarter notes. Every time that sequence happens, it's down a step. And it has that same passing back and forth between the instruments, because if we pay attention to the viola, that's a G. I know that's a G. G, E, F sharp, D, E, C sharp. So we get, the same idea that this sequence is not only there's a sequence that's descending its way down in the violins, but it's also descending its way down in the viola, and they're staggered, right? So when one of them has the quarters, the other has the 16ths and 8ths, and vice versa here. One of them has the quarters. So here the violin has the quarters, while the viola has the 16ths and 8ths. And then the very next beat, it's the viola that has the quarters and the violin that has the 16ths and 8ths. Right? So that pattern just keeps going back and forth. And that, in a nutshell, is what we expect. So this piece started off in the key of B minor. And it feels pretty clearly like the key of B minor. I will say there is no leading tone. We never got to hear the A sharp that would have really clearly established B minor until right there, we got and which that leading tone, the A sharp there, really helps establish that B as being the tonic in case there was any doubt. And there was some doubt, right? That came up in the discussion there in the community that, oh, well, it modulated to D at some point instead of B minor, and then it started to feel, maybe more like it was in the key of D, and was the ending surprising? I don't know. To me, it wasn't that surprising. I felt the B minor, but it's definitely an open possibility for discussion. So I don't know. I mean, I would love it if some people would sort of check in here and just let me know if, hey, Mr. Firefox, you're near me because I'm in Jupiter. Just so you know, I just noticed that you're in West Palm. I am currently in Jupiter, visiting family. So so yeah, this piece. Over the course of these sequences like that, that's typically where you see some modulations happen. So you might be in B minor, then you go through these sequences and you come out the other end, and now you're in some other key. And that's where I want to make reference to some of the notes. And actually, I think it's the notes on the other piece. Let me take a quick look on this one. So it's written for piano, but then you can, rearrange it for different things. And so there was a reference to changing the key from A minor to B minor to accommodate strings. I would say, I don't know, you might talk to some string players, and I don't know if we have any here right now, but A minor is not a bad key for strings. It's not particularly bad. It's when you add a lot of flats that they might be complaining, but you're not going to get a lot of complaints about A minor. So I wouldn't necessarily go too far out of your way for that. On the other hand, if it helps the range of the piece feel better, like, as it is, by taking it up, maybe you're able to get the violin to play, like, think about this, in the key of B minor. Well, that's still not going to be far enough. But what I was going to say is, in the key of B minor, the low string on a violin is the G string, right? Well, is that a useful note? If it was an F sharp in the key of B minor, then it would be scale degree 5. That's a great lowest note to have, but you're not quite there. You'd have to go to C minor to be able to get that low G in there. And then you'd have to say, is that too many flats? But anyhow, those are the kinds of things you think about. What is the lowest note that this instrument has? Maybe you think more about the lowest note when we're talking about the viola part, and but those are some things to think about. But yeah, I would say that they wouldn't complain too much about A minor either. So when the modulation to D happens, and the way we really know that modulation to D has happened is here, and against a D here, that's a D major triad there, and that's kind of asserted itself as being a thing. And then we get that A sharp back, and now it feels like we've got some B minor happening. And then at this point, it's kind of like we're back to D major. Let's listen to this for a second. At that point, we're maybe in A major. This last measure here, starting here, this note here is a G sharp. And at that point, it maybe feels like, and there's G sharp coming in the right hand also. That's when it starts to feel like we're in A major. And at that point, we land on A and C sharp, right? That's an A chord. That's the one chord. So yeah, I'm seeing people kind of agreeing that A minor is fine. And I would say yeah, not literally flats in A minor, but flatted scale degrees. So it's like you take A major and then you just take 3 scale degrees and lower them, but the scale degrees you're lowering, and sometimes we call that flatting them. You're lowering them from C sharp to C natural, from F sharp to F natural, from G sharp to G natural. So you're lowering as opposed to flatting, but we use the word flat as slang for lowering all the time, especially in jazz. The flatted third scale degree or whatever. So yeah, not literally flat signs in the key signature, but flatted scale degrees minor keys always have. So that idea that you're going to kind of wander around through keys like this, we visited B minor, we visited D major, we've now visited A major. These keys that you wander through, they're not usually random. And there's a comment that Dennis wrote in the D major one here where he talked about the keys that he went through. Originally, it was in C major, and it modulated through G major, D major, and A minor, and E minor, A major, and F major. So one thing that I would observe about that, and Dennis, if you're around, you might want to speak to this. How intentional this was. Usually, in a Baroque piece, especially like a relatively short piece, the modulations are to what we call related keys. And so, by related keys, what I really mean is if you have a piece that's in the key of C major, so no flats, no sharps, it will modulate the keys that have at most one flat or one sharp. In other words, they're only one different as far as the notes that are in the key. So going from C major to G major, yeah, then you've only added one sharp. Whether you do it with an actual key signature change, you wouldn't normally do that in a piece like this. You just use accidentals. But going from C major to G major, that's only one sharp different. From C major directly to D major, though, we're adding two sharps. Bach would be pretty unlikely to go directly from C major to D major. Would he go in two steps from C major to G major to D major? My perhaps uninformed sense of things is that he wouldn't likely do that in a piece, in a relatively short piece like this. He usually keeps closer to the original tonic, goes to G major, then maybe comes back to C, or goes to E minor from there, then maybe A minor, but wouldn't ever make it all the way to D major in a piece this short. I don't know if that's really the case. Maybe if I studied the inventions more, I would discover that Bach does do that. But also like A major, now that's three sharps. That's a lot different from C major. But what it does have going for it is if you can go to A minor, well, then it might make sense to put a little major key on that, right? If you're going to A minor anyhow, you might stick a C sharp in it sometime and call it A major, just landing on an A major chord. So, but that sort of thing, how free composers get with their modulations is one of the things that sort of developed over time. Like the Baroque composers stayed pretty close to home as far as the keys, and the early classical composers too. By the time you get to people like Beethoven, they're much freer with their key changes, and by the time you get to Chopin, it's like anything goes. And Debussy, anything goes as far as the key changes. So following the circle of fifths. Okay, so yeah, and I guess I would be curious to know, like if you look at Bach's modulations, Bach's actual modulations, you'd have to analyze them to do this. And I'm going to show you something in a second that I've done. But he starts off in C, and so that makes it really easy to check the modulations by looking at accidentals. The first accidental we see is F sharp because he's modulating to G. If he were to follow the circle of fifths from there, he would end up in D, and we'd see some C sharps. And the thing is, we do see a C sharp over here, but by the time we see the C sharp, the F sharp has left us. And the reason we see the C sharp here is that we're actually reaching D minor, not D major. Right? At that point, when we start seeing the C sharps, we're on a D minor, not a D major. And now you're seeing the B flats as well as the C sharps because it's harmonic minor. And then you see that kind of melodic minor line. 5, 5, 6 as in the major sixth, major seventh, 1. And then we see major sixth, major seventh, 1 in A minor. So he's doing similar sorts of things to get to A minor, and so when you see the G sharps, it's because he's in A minor, which has no flats, no sharps in its key signature. So in this piece, you don't see Bach doing D major. You don't see him having both C sharp and F sharp together. And not just this piece. I mean, I could look at a lot of Bach pieces and see that, but I can't say that he never does that. So when I talk about things like modal composition, one of the things that you might want to model is the actual key changes that Bach went through on this piece. If you were to try to model this piece, I'm not saying you were, but you did reference this piece. So you could consider like going through the exact sequence of key changes, or the exact sequence of imitations, like which voice it started with, how long, like Bach's theme here is only 2 beats long. Your theme is 4 beats long in this piece, so it's not, directly modeled on this in that way, but that's one of the things one could try to model. But I also want to point out, like I've showed this book before. It's a not cheap book that I use as a textbook when I teach it in college Counterpoint courses, by Harold Owen, called Modal and Tonal Counterpoint. It's a really good book. It's not the only one, but they're all expensive. Okay? All the good ones are expensive. So this is that C major invention that you can see. I've taken a yellow highlighter to and kind of move through. Oh, I also see a question about going to C minor. That idea of going to the parallel minor from C major to C minor, that's a kind of a daring thing to do for the Baroque. I won't say Baroque composers never do that sort of thing, but much more common by the time you get to classical era, because it's definitely more dramatic, but there is a clear relationship. So I won't say that Bach never did it, because very likely he did. I'm just not enough of a scholar to be able to point to the specific examples. In any case, my yellow highlighter here is I'm like showing where the theme is, and this is when I took the course. I mean, I teach from this book, and so I marked it all up so that I could then teach from it and say, look, this is where the theme is, and I'll have to look at it every time. But I also, you can see all my pencil markings there, at least I think you can see them, where I'm writing in, oh, this is an inversion of it, this is a sequence, or here's the new key center. So that's the kind of study you want to do to a piece in order to really get inside it. So whether you're going to really do a really specific model, which again is not what Dennis was trying to do, but is something we've been talking about, you want to know what it is that you're modeling, what are the features of this thing, and get inside as much of it as you can. And once you understand all the things that make it tick, well, then you copy what you want to copy, what you want to learn from. I mean, you don't want to just copy out the whole piece, right? Now you've just copied out the whole piece, but you replace the theme with another theme, but maybe carry it through so some of the same analysis applies, as far as, oh, here it was used in inversion, here it was used as a sequence, etc. Maybe you follow that. Or maybe you feel like, I'll modulate to my own keys, but I'll keep the pattern of when he used the original theme and when he inverted it. Or maybe you decide the other way around. I'm going to not care about when to invert the theme. Maybe I'm never going to invert the theme, but I want to keep to his key sequence, or whatever you've chosen to model. So in any case, that idea that there's things about a piece that are the things you want to learn from, and then other things that are the things that you bring to it yourself. Because if you're going to do model composition, you want to compose. You want to write something. You don't want to just have a variation of what was there before. You want to feel like you've brought something interesting and creative to the table. Yeah, you do what you want, right? I mean, it's like you can copy it as exactly as you want, vary as little as you want, vary whatever you want. But what I'm suggesting is, find challenges to do your own thing within that context. I see Joanna's asking, post the title. Oh, yeah, title and author. Absolutely, I will do that. This is Harold. Hello. Harold Owen, and it's called Modal and Tonal Counterpoint. And what I will say about this book, one of the things that I like about it is that it covers kind of all of music history, all of Western music history, going back from, sort of pre-Renaissance, really, but, spending a lot of time on the Renaissance, spending a lot of time on Baroque, but not just like saying, okay, here's Renaissance, here's Baroque, that's it, but really talking about the transition between them, and then also talking about counterpoint in post-Baroque music, counterpoint in Mozart, counterpoint in Romantic composers, counterpoint in 20th century composers. So he's really trying to take a broad view while still giving a lot of focus on Renaissance and Baroque, which is what you expect. So it's a really good resource for that. Often what you find are people who focus on one or the other. A whole really good book on just Renaissance counterpoint, or a good book on just Baroque style counterpoint. And I like that this, because the course that I teach, just because that's what the course calls for in the course catalog to fulfill the degree requirements, says you're going to get both of these in one semester. And this was really one of the best textbooks I could find to try to cover both of them, that in a way that I could handle it in one semester. I will say that the course that I'm developing, the online course for Counterpoint, that you can already preview if you do the all access membership, is based on a similar model. I'm referencing a lot of different textbooks, but I'm just writing all of my own materials, but trying to have the same kind of basic model as this one of, let's be broad about this. Let's focus on all these different aspects of counterpoint and use Renaissance and Baroque music for a lot of our examples, but let's try to talk about it more broadly than that. So anyhow, I started talking about the general idea of this model composition sort of thing, and trying to model. So I don't have a link to the book, but it's on Amazon, but it's, like I said, it's like $120 or something like that. It's not a cheap book. And sometimes these things go out of print. Oh, did my screen go blank? My screen went blank? Sure did. Hold on. It's a good thing I look at that thing sometimes. All right, I should be back now. I think I'm back now. Yeah. So yeah, it looks like I'm back. So yeah, that happens occasionally. Who knows why? Okay. So let me know that you're hearing me, but I'm pretty sure I'm broadcasting. Yeah, I hear myself going, which I do a lot, right? Okay, so what I'm going to do is morph into talking about this piece from Humble New Music, who wrote an interesting piece based on the prelude in C major by Bach, which we've been talking about some, and several people have been finding ways of writing based on that. So that piece I played a little bit of last time and showed the Gounod piece where he stuck a melody on top of that. So what's going on here now is an interesting making a duet. So this is based on the idea of the duet challenge, but also saying, hey, what can I take from that Bach piece, even though it wasn't a duet? And I think he's done some really interesting things here. So I'm going to play it through and talk through a little bit of this one as well. right. So really good job getting that together. When he first wrote it, he maybe when Humble New Music wrote this piece, originally he posted harpsichord and piano parts separately, and I was a little confused by what was going on because I couldn't tell if they related. And as far as I could tell, they both had the at the same time. I didn't realize they were staggered, or maybe they weren't staggered. Maybe that didn't happen till later. You'll have to let us know. But yeah, this piece works well, and the thing that's nice about it is, so it's based on that C major prelude, not the invention, the prelude over here, in that it's following the same chord progression, C major chord, and Frank Paul had posted a nice analysis of the harmony of this piece. C major, D minor, G7, C major, right? And so forth all throughout the piece, posted kind of his analysis, not just of what the chord symbols are, but functionally what they're doing. It was a really nice analysis. So this piece is following that same thing. We have C major, and then D minor, and then G major, and then C major again, right? So it's following the same harmonic sequence pretty well throughout. I didn't check to see if there were further variations further on down, but it's mostly the same basic model. And it also has the same kind of vibe about it of being arpeggio based, right? This piece, as I observed last time, has no single definable melody. The whole piece is a melody. It's that arpeggio is the melody, and yet each note of the arpeggio forms a melody. So if I focus on, I think I did the first three notes last time. This time I'll do this note here. It's not necessarily the most interesting melody, but it's a smooth melody, right? So that's what it has going for it. And each of these, you could follow the first 16th of each run. G, A, B, so that's what makes this piece. And so to me, if I were modeling this piece, it wouldn't necessarily be about that specific chord progression. That chord progression is that chord progression. I might want to say, okay, but now can I make voice leading that good? Where I have a single arpeggio that flows through the entire piece, but at each point I can follow the bottom note of the arpeggio, or just the second note of the arpeggio, or just the third note, or just the fourth note, or just the fifth note. It's a 5-note arpeggio, where each note carried from one chord to the next is voice-led exquisitely. And so that's the thing that I would be challenging myself, but then I would say, let me just do a different chord progression. So it looks like the people who have been playing with this have mostly stuck with the same chord progression, which is fine. But what I'm mostly interested in is the voice leading. And so I want to do the same sort of thing of looking at the pattern here. C, B, C. So is this B part of the arpeggio, or is it just like a neighbor tone? So I might ignore, if every single place has that same idea of neighbor tone, then come back, then I might just ignore that note. If you get the first note right, if you make the note that has the neighbor, right, the initial note, if you make that note connect well, then the neighbor's going to connect well too. So it jumped up at that point. And that's fine. There can be occasional leaps up there, and maybe Bach did that. I wasn't really checking one way or the other. Did that actually? Let's answer that question. That leap happened. It was on the place where the F sharp chord comes in, where the chord that has an F sharp, it's a D chord really, but that A leapt to a D. And so if I check the actual Bach original, the place where the F sharp comes in, the A is like the middle note of the right hand, and sure enough, it leaps to D. So absolutely, that's exactly, he's basically keeping that exact uh, that exact pattern. So I think he's got the exact pattern. So this is basically using Bach's voice leading, but the new element being brought to the table is now this is a much more intricate pattern, and it has the imitation going, which makes it especially interesting. Right? So we have this imitation going. The piano states that arpeggiated pattern, and then the harpsichord states it, and that back and forth happens throughout, but it doesn't happen necessarily exactly, right? If you let this, it's the same through, it's the same for one, two, three, four, five notes, but then this one leapt up to B, whereas this one leaps only up to G and then comes down. Why? Because it's time for the next measure. So there had to be an adjustment at the end of the pattern to fit the next chord. So so that totally works. So yeah, when Dave asked about what is there no melody, so Humble New Music mentioned that the goal they left for themselves was to not have there be a singable melody, and that's sort of a negative way of putting it. Because when you said that at first, I was like, oh, well, that's sort of a weird thing to say. But then when I realized what was going on, I'm like, okay, yeah, it's not that there's a single melody. It's that each voice, you could do the same thing of following G, A, right? It's the same thing of following a certain note in the pattern. And the bass voice has its own character because it's actually being clearly sustained. C, 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 right? So the bass voice, by mere virtue of being sustained in a different octave from everything else, because everything else is all kind of up there. I mean, I guess the lower harpsichord note is low too, but it waited too long to come in to assert itself as the melody. We are hearing the piano left hand, I would say, as the melody. Did I hear the playing of it on the video? Yeah, I did. Yeah, and it's if that's what you mean, the video. Yeah, so the video sounds good as well, and by all means, people go back to the community and check that out. But I like to be able to, kind of work with the piece in here, so that's why I'm doing that. But yeah, it's a nice recording. Is that you actually playing it, or is it just a different sound font or what? I'm not really sure what it is that I was hearing, but it did sound good. Okay, so yeah, that imitation works well. And one of the other things that then you want to start talking about when you have, for some reason, my, give me one moment, my scrolling was working funny. Okay, when you have this multiple voice counterpoint, now we want to start talking about like the intervals formed between the voices and how they work. And one of the things is, as long as you're sticking to chord tones, you can get away with just about anything between the voices. But you've got all these other notes, these little passing tones and neighboring tones and things, mostly neighbor tones actually. And then it's interesting to pay attention to how they work. And they work really nice because you've got things like, right, that is C, C, B, C against E, D, E. And those are sixths between the C and the E. So the way the pattern works, because the melody, whatever, the arpeggio includes a note a sixth below the first note, right? Whatever the first note is, the next note of the pattern down here was a sixth below. It meant we got that sixth when the other voice comes in. Now, that pattern doesn't happen throughout. Right here, again, it's a note, and then the low note is a sixth below. But if the note below is not a sixth below, it's going to make me wonder, well, what happens? Like here, A, the note that corresponds to the note that it's heard against is a fifth below. So it's A in the harpsichord against D. So here, I think Now I'm finally understanding. Well, I don't know if this is the reason or not, but notice that these neighbor figures are mostly lower neighbor. Right? A note down, then back up. And most of these figures are that, lower neighbor figures. But this one is an upper neighbor figure. I just lost it in my head right here. Is this upper neighbor figure. Why? Well, if it had gone down to a C, we'd have parallel fifths. We'd have A to D and then G to C. You could have made it C sharp and gotten away from that, and maybe that would have been okay-ish. But I liked the fact that I'm seeing what I'm guessing is a deliberate attempt, a deliberate and successful attempt to avoid parallel fifths by changing the direction of that neighbor tone. Now, the direction of the neighbor tone had already changed here, so maybe right there it was already going up instead of down. So maybe it's not just about the parallel fifths, but here I would say that was definitely needed. But I would want to do the same thing elsewhere and pay attention to other places where, in fact, yeah, so now I want to catch it, right? Here's a nice little tritone F sharp C resolving very nicely to G to B. It's feeling like you did a nice job with this. Like I can try hard and I might fail to catch you because you were on the ball about this. But if what I'm telling you is like, oh, I didn't think about that, then I probably will. But here's another perfect fifth between F and C, but it goes in contrary motion. One of them has a lower neighbor, the other has an upper neighbor. So that's a really nice device that is going on here that's making this work. Now, most of the places it is sixth, D to F. And so most of the places where it's sixth, that's always going to work really, really, really well. So, aha, gotcha. Right there. All right, I knew if I looked hard enough, I'd be likely to find one. But there's a parallel fifth. So if you're familiar with parallel fifths and had been working to avoid them, here's one more to deal with. If you weren't familiar with them, you did a good job of just staying away from them somehow unintentionally. But right there, from C to F is a fifth, and then from B to E is a fifth, and then C to F is a fifth. Right? It's three perfect fifths in a row, moving by step in parallel like that. And the observation I had made is that the place where you're going to see that is with the fifth of the chord, because usually these parallel fifths happen between the roots and fifths of two successive chords. But here it was in a neighbor tone figure. It was two different voices that were a fifth apart. Neither of them are actually the fifth of the chord. This is a Well, actually, it is. It's the root. This is an F chord, and F is the root, C is the fifth, and so that was the thing. So there is a parallel fifth detector as a plugin. So but I think it's not going to handle this because it's really meant for like 4-part choral music. But I am a little curious to see if the parallel fifth detector plugin. So there's a couple different ones, but this one under proofreading, check for parallel fifths. Ha 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 ha. 5 parallels found. Okay, it found the one that I found. Where else did it find parallel fifths? Oh, wow, there's a sneaky one. Because this one wasn't part of that neighbor tone figure. It was in the middle of a leap. And this one is even sneakier. I don't even know what it's talking about here. Yeah, I'm not sure where it's talking about in here. Somewhere in there must be one, but again, it's like a sneakier one. But it must be between somewhere. I don't even know what voices it's between. Oh, between this voice and this voice, maybe? I don't even know. But there you go. But that was the main one it found, which is the same one I found in my little my scan. So in any case, yeah, the call and response that happens between the voices is really nice. And if you just keep up that call and response, that counterpoint there, then you get something that's not an invention, but it uses imitative counterpoint, and yet it's also based on that prelude. So it's got these sort of multiple elements all kind of working together, and I think very effectively. So yeah, I think that's a really nice piece. And then there's places where the pattern changes, right? And this change up of the pattern is that change up that happened there. What is that measure? Because I guess the measure numbers must line up, right? That change up happens in measure 27. The original prelude doesn't change up in measure 27, but it does later, right? Measure 27 is still this. It's the same basic pattern, but it's now doing it on top of a pedal point, this repeated G. These chords are changing. It really started, the pedal point started back here. That G is just sustaining throughout this part, but the pattern doesn't change. And so this piece here is electing, you know what, at this point, once we reach this pedal point, I'm going to let the pattern change. And the pattern is no longer starting off with that neighbor tone figure, but it's starting off with a stair step figure, boo da do da dum, right? The same figure that Bach had in this piece. Right? That da 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 dum. I don't know why I call it a stair step. It kind of looks like stairs a little bit, right? Looks stair steppy to me. That's what I'm calling it, and you can't stop me. So, so he's got this kind of stair steppy figure here. And then it establishes its own comment. And yeah, and as far as the no singable melody, I mean, I would claim that box piece is not singable either by any ordinary measure. Your leaps are bigger for sure, right? This, I do, oh, I can't sing it in that octave. E, C, F sharp. No, I can't even get that because I have to think too hard. I'm not a good singer. You all know that. I can't. That's over an octave, and it's a tritone on top of that. So it's like that's yeah. And at that tempo, hardly anyone could sing. Bobby McFerrin can sing that kind of stuff. He's crazy. But E C F sharp. Why? F sharp, F sharp. I'm trying to get it in the right octave. C, F sharp, E, F sharp, E, C. Yeah, it's just hard. But I would claim that Bach's isn't a singable melody either, right? This. I'm just guessing at these pitches, but it's easier because it's a much narrower range, right? It's a much narrower range, and the direction doesn't change as often, and the leaps aren't as big. So those are things that make this a more singable melody as that goes if you try to sing the entire arpeggio. But it's not about the arpeggio as a melody. It's about the voice leading. So in any case, yeah, I think quite successful. So the emphasis in the left hand sounds wrong. So which one are you talking about? This guy here, the prelude? So what's happening is the C is written long, as is the E, and the rest are written as sixteenths. So that is what's written. You will hear the left hand more because they sustain and the others don't. Now, when people play this on the piano, you have to decide, is that really what was meant? Is that really what I want to do? Or do I want to treat them really as all 16th notes? It could be that Bach's reason for writing it this way with sustained notes in the left hand was really sort of just an accident of music notation-y sort of stuff, as opposed to him, because on a harpsichord or the kinds of keyboard instruments that Bach would have been playing, this note would not really have sustained very long. The sustain on harpsichords is not very long at all. It decays very quickly. So a modern piano is capable of sustaining that C much more. So it sounds different on a modern piano than the kind of claviers that Bach would have been dealing with. But again, I don't know the specific instrument he maybe wrote this at. So anyhow, I've talked about a bunch of different things, and I don't know if people have any last questions that you might want to throw to me or to either of the composers here, or from either of the composers on anything. But I really just love doing this and love seeing the different music that people come up with. I know there was something else I wanted to talk about in Dennis's comments in here. About the copyright application. Yeah, that was actually it. Just in case anyone isn't familiar with this, copyright law, it's a complicated subject, but it changed dramatically during my lifetime. Law. Now, you can register it, and that you would need to do that before you could actually sue someone, but it is completely illegal to using the copyright mark. You can totally put in the copyright mark even before you've ever applied for a copyright, so you don't really have to do that. So if I bring up the special characters palette here with F2, I can add the copyright right now and say, yes, it is copyright Dennis McShane. There we go. So this is totally accurate. You don't even have to say that it's pending. You already have it. So yeah, that is the story. But copyright in the UK, every country is different, but anyone who has signed the Berne Convention, and the UK definitely has signed the Berne Convention, you do not need to register for copyright. It is absolutely a fundamental concept of the Berne Convention that registration is no longer required. And again, it's been that way since the 80s in most countries. The United States was one of the later joiners of that, as is often the case. But so the details of, what does registration allow you to do in the United States? It allows you to sue. So you have to do it before suing, but, you don't have to do it before the violation occurred. It's really irrelevant for that purpose. There are certain statutory damages that can be collected if you had previously registered the work before, as opposed to just actual damages. So you can basically fine someone money just for having stolen it, rather than calculating how much money you lost because of the steal. So yeah, there are certain things that the registration grants you, but the copyright itself is completely automatic. I think there's 3 countries in the entire planet that don't do it. One of them is some Papua New Guinea, or I don't remember. Some island somewhere in the South Pacific is not a part of it, and some other island somewhere, and I think some country in Africa maybe is out of it, but I don't remember. There's 3 countries on the entire planet that are not part of the Berne Convention, and everyone else is. So so proving the dates is really easy. Post to MuseScore, right? there's your proof right there. Your post to MuseScore will clearly predate anyone else that anyone else is. No one else will be able to have shown that they wrote it any earlier, because they didn't write it earlier, right? And so by mere having put it online somewhere, you've got yourself a electronically trackable timestamp. So that's actually one of the better ways. The old wives' tale of mailing yourself a copy, it's never once ever been tested or held up in court. So that's sort of an old wives' tale. But actually, internet posting is totally legit and has been used many times as establishing proof of authorship. So all right. So I think I am going to. Hopefully I've repeated the point about the copyright, Joanne. But yeah, you could go back and watch this again. But the point is that you don't need to register for copyright to have copyright protection. Registering is an optional step that gives you some extra rights in some countries, in certain cases that, in the vast majority of cases, do not matter at all. 0. For the basic idea of, is it illegal for someone to steal your music? It is, whether you apply for copyright or not. And that's just a fundamental aspect of copyright law. So on that note, I'm going to play out my theme here. and thank everyone for having been here. If people have any last duets you want to get in, by all means. But I would say that particular topic we've been running with for like a month, and maybe I'll find a new little challenge to issue for next time. I know I talked about sonata form, and I do kind of want to talk about that, and we'll see what we come up with. But again, this is something I do every Thursday at this time, so I hope you come back. Please join the community. It's pinned up at the top of this chat. Join it. You can either join it for free or, as I recommend, become an all-access member, and you get access to all my online courses as well as additional content. So highly recommended if you want to get the most out of music education. So until next time, see you all later, and keep creating music.